start by introducing myself and maybe why I'm teaching on the topic that I'm teaching. My name is Monika Stelzl, and I'm a prof at St. Thomas University. I'm a social psychologist, so that's, I don't say what I've been trained to do, but basically that's the area that I work in. And one of the courses that I teach, Matthew, maybe I will give you handouts, and if people come, I need one, so I have a picture. So one of the courses that I teach is a specifically course in social influence, and I developed and designed this course, and I've been now teaching it for, I don't know, several years. I don't remember how many times. And I love teaching it for a variety of reasons. One reason is that it resonates with me on a personal level. I was born in Czechoslovakia in 1971, so it was heavy totalitarian system when I lived there, and we left in 1989. My family left in 1989, probably about 7 months before the Velvet Revolution. So during my first 17 years, I basically lived in an oppressive system, and that really made me sensitive. Not necessarily when I was there, but where I'm now, how the lack of basic freedoms and oppression is not just easily to snuck onto us, but how we can miss it and we can live with it. So I lived under this kind of ideal assumption that by emigrating or fleeing to the West, I would live in free and ideal society. Not utopia, but definitely more free than it is. So gradually I came to recognize that there are powers beyond us that influence us how to behave and how to think. So I think it's quite important to know what social influence is and how does it work. So I want to talk about, I will give you kind of definition of social influence, but then I'm also going to talk about why is it effective, or what are some principles that make it effective. And I'm using social psychology as kind of the basis for that. And forms of social influence, some forms of influence aim at changing behaviors. So let's say somebody wants you to close your bank account and move to credit union and open your account there. So the influence here would be to make behavioral change. But there are other forms of changes as well, like changing our attitudes and beliefs and thoughts. And so the example I came up with today, I tried to come up with an example that tied to Occupy movement. So if our government is trying to lead us to believe that really we elected them and they are there to work for us, for our purposes, to serve its citizens, and they will work very hard, right? We know, I was listening to CBC this morning, the current and the whole, and I saw the sign, why do we have this new bill, crime bill, with respect to jails, and the government is trying to present it in a sense that it's going to protect victims, right? So it's framing the message in a specific way, trying us to believe it. At that level, if we change our beliefs and we change our attitudes and opinions, that is a really deeper form of social influence, which I think, I don't want to preach and say, you know, these are practical messages, but if we want to really deeply influence somebody, or if somebody is influencing us, and it's at these values and core beliefs that we have, well, we need to be careful, because that can really change our entire system of beliefs and actions and so on. When we talk about social influence, in social psychology, we differentiate between two types of thinking and processing. So I want to mention those briefly at least. And those are controlled or systematic processing on one hand, and then heuristic or automatic processing on the other hand. So what is meant by systematic processing is that we pay attention to information in our surroundings. So you use cognitive processing you use cognitive resources, you're attentive to what is happening around you. So you basically use analysis. And then automatic processing or heuristic processing is kind of the opposite of it. So it's when we respond to things in automatic habitual fashion. So we don't really process information very carefully. And I will talk about some principles associated with this heuristic processing. Now, when we don't process information very carefully, we are more vulnerable to be influenced at any level because we are not paying attention. So when I say that, and when I say to my students, we talk about, okay, so that doesn't make sense, right? We ideally want to process information systematically, including what government is saying, what the media is saying, or what people involved in the Occupy movement are saying. So my first question to you is, why do you think we would not process information systematically? What are some situations in your life where you didn't really pay careful attention to information around you? So you would switch into that automatic processing. Yeah.
I would say any time we get into a routine.
Okay, so when something is a routine, now what do you think makes it a routine? Why do you do something as a routine? Yeah, so it's efficient, right? When we use routines, it can be quite efficient, and we have busy lives, right? So that's one reason. Any other reasons when you go, okay, when you're not really processing information carefully? So routine.
You hear it over and over again?
Yeah, so repeated message that you kind of, you start believing it, maybe, Matthew? Or are you tired of it?
It's just part of the kind of normal everyday.
Yeah. So over and over things. So we kind of tune out because we just heard it too many times. And not only we tune out, we start believing it as well, right? Yeah.
There's a lack of information in the process here involved, as we usually just assume whoever is running it or whatever knows better.
Yeah, so, and that's exactly one of the principles I will talk about, that there is either lack of information, so we go to heuristic processing and go, okay, it's authority or expert on that particular issue, she or he knows. Or there is so much information, like somebody speaks super, super fast, that you just tune out and go, yeah, it's, that message must be valuable because it's by expert and it's fast. So then you just process automatically. I saw one more hand.
Yeah, I was going to say from authoritative figures, so like a doctor, or even when you're young, your parents are teaching you things, you take those things for granted because they're the authority as adults in your life.
So we are taught certain things that we should not process systematically, right? We are not going to stand up and question certain things because that's inappropriate. Any other examples that you can think of that would prevent you or discourage you from processing systematically or carefully? And I think you nailed them. When we look at research in social psychology, it's basically when we are tired, we don't have the motivation, or there is too much information, or it's emotionally so problematic or arousing. So there is a fear that we will lose a job and we will lose a house and there will be no food next year, that we really don't even want to think about it. So we're not going to process the messages that are thrown at us very carefully. So one thing that Cialdini, where I am taking the information, I brought you the book that I'm using in my course, and I will leave it here because I'm really just super skimming the surface. He talks about this click and rare response. So when we don't think really carefully, or we think habitually, certain things, certain triggers in our social environment will basically lead to a response, automatic response. So it's a trigger leading to fixed action response, or it's the click which then elicits a behavior response. So as the person said, both of you said with authority, that would be a click. That's a trigger in our environment. So a parent says something, or police says you have to do this, and the police person has a uniform. We only pay attention to the uniform. We are not necessarily thinking, why is the police saying it? Does he or she have the right? Like G20, right? What was the police doing? Did they have the right to do that? Not necessarily. But because we are so conditioned to not process those specific trigger features, we don't pay attention to the context. So that's why I think it's important to know what some of these triggers are. So I'm going to go through 6 of them and describe them. Before I do that, I want to say, I think 2 or 3 points. I really dislike heuristic automatic processing. When I teach it and when I read about it, there is a strong suggestion that heuristic processing is okay here and there because we live in very complex, technologically advanced society, and hence we need to use these shortcuts to function. Well, as I know more about social psych, and as I guess I'm paying attention to things like Occupy movement, I really dislike, I think it's basically brainwashing by psychologists to say it's okay to process heuristically. So what I wrote on the handout is, I guess it's efficient to sometimes go into these automatic responding ways. But when is it okay and when it's not? And I haven't figured it out. So I think, yeah.
I'll just give an example. Richard Dawkins, if any of you know him, he talks about children, for example, and this heuristic processing, and like, you may tell your child, don't go down near the river because alligators are there. Well, the child can't go and test that out on their own, otherwise they'll end up dead.
Yeah,
so
totally.
That's an example of when heuristic processing is definitely helpful and efficient.
But it also, so it goes to, with kids, they constantly ask why, right? Till they drive you crazy. So they're still engaged in that systematic processing. And to me, what's fascinating is when do we stop asking why and we just accept it, right? We just accept of, I'm not going to go down there because there are crocodiles. Well, there might not even be a river down there, for all I know. So I think this is the nuances in it that, and we are exposed to this don't ask why since we are very little. And we just go, okay, I'm not going to make conflict in my family or push because people get upset. I don't have any friends anymore because I ask them why, and so on. Yeah.